Hi, welcome to Jot Notes, a podcast where we dive into the world of stories and books. My name's Jenna Green, and I will be guiding you on this wonderful literary journey with the extraordinary Miranda O, who has the privilege and honor of introducing our guest for today. Hi, Miranda.
Hello, hello. I am thrilled to introduce our guest today as Mark has been chatting with us and on previous shows of ours. So Mark Leslie, he is a Canadian author of horror and speculative fiction. And he's also a self-confessed book nerd. And I can attest to this because any question I have when it comes to books or the industry, he tends to have a fountain of knowledge. Now, he's known for both fiction and nonfiction titles, and he's with us today. So I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark.
It's always great to be hanging out in the library with you two.
I know, look, we got the library. We look like we have a
books.
good selection of books behind us. Now,
and so do you.
Right? Yours are real. Ours are just for looks. Now, I always kind of try to go a little bit into the emotional side of things and to the story as to how we got here. So when did you and how did you get into writing?
I was always a storyteller. From the time I was a little kid playing with Fisher Price little figurines. It wasn't just about playing, it was about telling stories. And my stories were these epic adventures that would last weeks and weeks. They would be to be continued and serial cliffhangers and all the things. And I was an only child, so that's how I entertained myself. That I migrated over to stick figure cartoons. And I realized the beauty of, oh my God, I can share a story not just in my head with myself, but someone else can look at it and roll their eyes or feel something or laugh, because some of the ones were funny. And then I realized as I started to fall in love with the written word, not just story, it was typing. It was handwriting, it was typing, and it was putting stories, like just typing up stories. I didn't start sending stories out. This is back in the dark ages of writing and publishing, where you actually, wrote them up on a typewriter and mailed them to publishers. I got my first rejection at the age of 15, and
Wow.
thousands of rejections since, of course. but I persisted, and it was 1992, the same year I graduated from university, was when my very first short story was published, and I've never looked back. So I started getting my short stories published. My first book came out in 2004, and I've done both traditional and self-publishing, and I fully embrace both of them because I guess I was meant to be a storyteller from day one.
I like that because I can resonate with that. It was always, for me, I was always telling people stories, and early on in my careers or the jobs that I had as a younger adult, I'd always get scolded like, you're here to work. You're not here to tell people stories about whatever you went through over the weekend. I'm like, yeah, but there's some like juicy stuff in there, and like it's the saga of Miranda. Like, we got to keep this going with cliffhangers. So I can completely resonate with that. And we often talk about on our show that don't be afraid to get rejected. Like, behind every success story, Jenna, you always say this way more eloquently than I do, but behind every success story, there's probably 1,000 refusals or denials when it comes to sending and sharing your stories out.
1,001.
Yeah, right. Now, I am an avid TikTok fan of yours because your dad jokes are unlike anything else. Like, I will send them to my dad, I will perform them on people. So outside of storytelling and being an awesome dad joke connection for me, when you're not writing, what can readers and fans find you doing?
Well, when it's not pandemic times, you'll find me wandering through the nearest library or bookstore. I can't go to a town without visiting a bookish locale. But the other thing I'm most passionate about is beer locations. So when I travel, it's to breweries. I just got back from Superstars writing seminars in Colorado Springs, which takes place every February there. And oh my God, what a mecca for beer places. Because even though I've been to so many breweries, I mean, I skipped a year because they didn't have the conference last year. And just beside Oscar Blues, which is like one of the has one of the best beers I've had. It's a Death by Coconut, and it's a chocolate
Ooh,
coconut stout.
wow.
And I was so happy that they had it on. They had barrel aged one, a special edition. So I just had like 2 of those for lunch one day. But then right beside them, a new brewery called Bell's Brothers just opened up, and I'm thinking, oh my god. And thank God I'm going back to Colorado Springs 2 more times this year, because I haven't had a chance to see all the brewery places. So as you can tell, I'll go to a books and beers. Anything that has books or beers in it, I'm there.
You're the double B in the books and beers. I'm the double B. I'm the triple B when it comes to books, bubble baths, and bubbles, like champagne bubbles.
Champagne.
Got to sip my champagne and turn the page. Okay, now I can I can resonate with you on the beer front. I don't know if it was the pandemic or leading into the pandemic, but I found that anywhere you went, especially where I am in Manitoba, all these little microbreweries were popping up like out of nowhere. And you sit down and you taste the beer and you've never heard of the combination before. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I grew up in a family with Bud Light and Budweiser. Like, that was
Right.
the extent of the beer. And now, I don't know if I'm not a drinker of beer when it comes to those 2 choices, but craft beer though is like a whole other level of deliciousness. And then pair it with a good book. And
should I tell either of you that my brother-in-law owns or opened and owns a brewery?
Oh my
I'm
God.
sorry, should we send you our mailing addresses?
Yes. What's the name of the brewery? Maybe I've been to it.
Well, he's a chemist at a university.
Makes sense.
His name of his brewery is Theoretically Brewing Company, and then all the shirts have like periodic tables with like beer stuff on it.
Oh my God. I have to introduce them to the Bell's Brothers Brewing, because their entire theme is science and scientists. And all the beers are named after and sometimes they're in jokes for other scientists, because the average person like me looks at it, and then one guy who was with us, he's an engineer, and he goes, I know what that means.
It's like,
I never know any of
There's
it.
creativity there. There's amazing creativity in the brewing process. Now, I tried to brew myself. I'm not so good at it. I would rather just drink the beer, not make the beer.
Yep.
I don't have the patience for it, but I do so love. Just like people like to read books, and they don't like to write books. I'm the same way with beer.
Yep. Definitely. I think something in the beer world, they like to have fun with it. I very much enjoy my wine as well, and learning about the science behind the wine. And it's a very serious process. And I'm sure brewing beer is a very serious process too, but there's something that comes fun and creative and I want to say whimsical, but that's definitely not the word that I want, but it's laid back, where wine is a very serious, put together little hoity-toity. Don't get me wrong, I still love my wine, but beer is fun. It's super fun. And when you're not in like -50, then, a hot day, good cold beer can solve anybody's problems.
Exactly.
Okay, now I have one more question for you that I have planned out. Obviously, tangents happen all the time, but I mentioned that you are a book nerd, and I can attest to it, because anytime I come up with questions, you always have answers, and greatly appreciated for that one. But how did you come out to that self? How did you come to describing yourself as a book nerd?
So again, when I was a kid, my mom used to read to me, which I always enjoyed. My Baba, my mom's mom, had purchased like a little Disney book club thing. So like once a month you get a different Disney book, and I love to flip through the pictures when I was younger and then read them. Going to the library was always such a thrill, stacking books. My mom also worked at the local mini mart, and every Tuesday would bring home comic books for me. And that's kind of where I really got into reading. It was Spider-Man and Richie Rich and different comics like that. And I continued on with that reading. And then just as I got older, I could not get enough reading. When I went to university, I got my degree in English language and literature, because I didn't know what else I wanted to do other than be a writer. So I'm like, well, I'll just get something in my field. Maybe I'll teach. And it was in my last year of university, as I was graduating, that I got a part-time job as a bookseller in Ottawa. Cole's store number 23 on Spark Street in Ottawa. So obviously the 23rd store in the chain that had that since merged with Smith Books and became Chapters, and then Chapters Indigo, and all the things that happened since then. And it was that point that I got bit by the book bug, meaning, oh my God, I can work in the industry. I can work in the book industry like this, not just try to sell my stories, but I can work there. And that was the same year I sold my first short story to a small press magazine after thousands of rejections. And that was sort of the beginning of the end for me, because I've worked in the book industry ever since. And I've worked in every kind of bookstore imaginable, mall store, big box store, chain store, indie bookstore, academic bookstore, online bookstore, ebook store. The only two kinds of bookstores I have not yet worked in are a used bookstore and a Christian bookstore. So,
Okay.
but I'm still young, I guess, or youngish. Maybe
We
I
can
will.
find you a used Christian bookstore.
2 for 1.
That would like two birds with one stone. Right?
Yep.
Just
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, maybe I can just do even just a part-time job for a few months. That would be fun.
I love used bookstores, and if they let me, if I'm really nice, and they let me go in the back, and then I dig through and see if I can find like antique books, from like 100 or 200 years ago. Obviously, I live in the Canadian prairies, so we're not known for finding works of literature 5 million years old, but
You never know.
I have a few that are at least 200 years old.
Oh, but there's nothing like a used bookstore, like the treasure you can find in used bookstores. I'm dangerous to travel with when there's either a bookstore, or especially a used bookstore, or a brewery, especially a craft brewery. I may just disappear, and you may never see me again.
Right.
There's
Go to
that-
the used bookstore, pick some
Yeah.
stuff up, and then go sit at the brewery.
There's
Yeah.
either a shirt or a mug where it's like not to be trusted in a bookstore unsupervised.
Exactly, especially not with a credit card, like with a big limit on it.
It is not it's not safe at all.
And I'm actually worse now than I used to be, having a child to buy for. It's way where I'm like, oh, here's a few books for me and some for her. I'm like, oh.
Yes, it's really for me, but we'll say they're for her. Yes.
You know what? I'll tell you a little something that I never thought of. My partner works at a provincial jail, and he comes home with golden nuggets of books. I'm like, where did you find this? Oh, somebody left it in an office, because I guess night shifts, people read there, plus
Right.
the inmates, they read.
Yeah.
So you never know what you're going to find, but we have found he's picked up so many good books and kind of brought them home so he can keep them until he can go and read one at a time over his night shifts, etc. But yeah, I never anticipated a jail being a place to pick up some good books.
Yeah.
Good
well,
stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good stories and good books too. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think one of the funniest, it wasn't a used bookstore, it was a garage sale. But, as a teacher, I always need some for my classroom libraries. You're trying to get deals as well. And there was someone, and they were like, oh, this is a really good book. You should take it. And I was like, I've read it. They're like, well, you could have it again. I'm like, I also wrote it.
I wrote it.
They were like, so they had me sign it, and then they took it back. They're like, we're keeping it now. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, that's a good feeling.
That's
a good
the
feeling,
only time in my whole life I've ever kind of felt famous. I'm not famous, but I had like 30 seconds where I felt famous.
Bingo. That was a perfect moment.
That is a good moment.
So
I've seen my book in the back car. Sorry, the back window of a car as somebody was driving down the highway, and they took a picture and they sent it to me. They're like, is this like purposeful advertising? I said, nope, but that's pretty darn cool.
That is sweet. That is sweet.
Sorry, Jeff.
So you mentioned Spider-Man. Well, you mentioned comic books, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and your love for them. But how has it infiltrated its way, or has it, I guess, but has it made its way into your writing? And if so, how? How did it work its way in?
It has. It really, really has. I mean, the sense of wonder from the Marvel comics. What if a nerd was bit by a radioactive spider and got these extra powers? My Canadian Werewolf series, my main character Michael Andrews, who happens to be a writer living in New York, he was a huge Spider-Man fan. So when he is cursed with lycanthropy and has extra sensory powers while he's a human, he uses these powers in the same way because he talks a lot about being inspired by Stan Lee in the Spider-Man comics. So there was a lot of character development was based on his morality was based on the Peter Parker of the comic books, and so that's come out quite a bit in that series. I mean, there are silly dad jokes in that series as well. So there's another part of me there. There's musical earworm pieces because I'm really, really good at infecting people with musical earworms. When I get in a conversation, lyrics snippets just come to me, and I respond in lyric snippets. Sometimes just happens. And if it happens to be a one-hit wonder earworm, and I leave you with that stuck whirling in your mind, oh well, it's the
You're welcome.
equivalent of a really good dad joke, right?
And you got to check Mark's TikTok out for dad jokes. You won't be disappointed at all. I'll throw it. I'll put it down in the banner so you can go follow him on TikTok because it definitely, like, I have ran out of the bedroom or my office or whatever I'm doing, and I'm like, oh my God, this is funny. And then I have to share it with somebody. My dad doesn't think I'm funny, but I think he thinks the jokes are funny. He just doesn't think that I'm funny for presenting them. It's supposed to be his thing.
It's like a
Close
mom
enough.
joke thing
Just
for
take
you,
credit.
right?
It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
There's something though about the stories that we grew up with, or the stories, whether that's a story through a comic book or a movie or a TV show. I mentioned pretty much every episode She-Ra, Princess of Power, and how it's influenced my entire life since I was 5. But like, there's something about the stories you get involved in when you're young. Like, there's stories I've read as I'm older, and I've definitely loved them, and they've impacted me. But there's something about the younger you are, and you get this nugget of an idea, or it stays with you, like that. What if, right? That superheroes exist or can exist, or we
Right.
can write about them. It's pretty.
Mhm.
We need a psychologist to go and analyze this in people about how those early connections.
Yeah, definitely.
It carries through, right? Like, this is something that had an impact on you, so it's like, obviously it's left a permanent impression, and
Mhm.
therefore it's something that's going to echo throughout your life, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yep, I think so too.
And so it's connected into your series. So can you tell us a few of the titles for the Canadian Werewolf series? Because I feel like I'm recognizing something, but I'm also not. What are some of the titles?
Yeah. So A Canadian Werewolf in New York is the first book in the series. It's followed by Stowaway, Stow, Vermont, and being stowaway on a train. So that's a different play on words. And Longing in Los Angeles. And the final book so far is Fright Nights, Big City. So if you haven't guessed, there may be a bit of a parallel in most of those titles. Little bit of a parallel to somewhat familiar, but not quite familiar movie titles, book titles, etc.
And is it the play on words, like your little in joke, or did the stories connect with the movies?
No, I mean, so the first one, A Canadian Werewolf in New York, was meant to be a standalone, and then readers demanded they wanted more, so I kind of went with it. But American Werewolf in London was a horror movie, but it had humor in it, and I knew that I wanted to have humor in this story because he wakes up naked in Battery Park with a bullet hole in his leg, the taste of human blood in his mouth, and he says, "What the hell did I do last night?" And so he's butt naked.
As
He's
you
got to
would.
get across Manhattan. First thing he tries to find this old discarded pair of like really tight pink panties, and he's putting them on. And so it's obviously it's like humorous, the things he has to do living with the side effects of being a wolf and not having conscious control. So the title is meant to suggest, yeah, there's a werewolf in it, but there's going to be humor. And
Right.
all along there's a lot of humor, and so it's meant to be a tip to the reader that says, okay, this is urban fantasy, it's action adventure, but there's going to be humor. And even the
Right.
chapter titles through all of the books are cheeky nods to things, or just a slip of, I just flip one word so it sounds like a song title, but I flip one word.
Right.
So that again, just to let the reader know that you should have some fun with this too. It's not all serious stuff.
Is it hard to mix, the fantasy, the action, the humor, or does that just flow pretty naturally?
I think it comes naturally, and again, inspired by Spider-Man. So one of the reasons why Spider-Man cracked jokes all the time is he was a geeky teenager who was terrified. He puts on this costume, and he's going out and fighting these bad guys. And and part of the reason that he quipped so much is it was nervous tension. And so Michael Andrews is, I describe him as a beta human but alpha wolf, or alpha wolf, beta human, big apple. That's sort of the tagline for the series. And he is nervous. He's not really good at it. He's a Canadian living in one of the world's largest cities. He's a pushover, so he's not like the big city American tough guy. And so there he is this a meek pushover, but he has these extra powers. So when he's fighting bad guys, he's cracking jokes and he's making comments just to alleviate the mood, almost like whistling past the graveyard. Where it's like, well, if I distract myself, maybe I won't be so scared. So there's humor in that.
It shows a lot
like
about
that.
his character.
Yeah, and I think it shows a lot about your writing style too. Being able to mix genres. Like, did you always set out to throw in humor or quirkiness or a little bit of pizzazz to the horror stories that you like to write?
No, not at all. Not at all. It just came out of his character. So these
Okay.
novels are told in first person point of view from his perspective. And I thought, okay, how do you deal with something like that? You got to laugh or else you're going to cry, right? How do you deal with, oh, great, now where am I going to find some clothes, or any of the situations he finds himself in? So a lot of it is his wry examples. And it kind of stems from a good friend of mine, my best friend, actually. Whenever we see people, we always compare them to a celebrity or someone that they look like. And Michael does that too. So instead of like this unnamed guy, he nicknames him based on some actor that he looks like, or something that he reminds him. So there's always this little wry commentary to the reader in the background. And I break the fourth wall a few times. In the latest novel, Fright Nights, Big City, I had a moment where, well, I had to have 2 or 3 weeks pass where stuff happens, and I needed to summarize it. So even the title of the chapter is, "What's the difference between a chapter and an interlude anyway?" is the name of that interlude, because I have interludes throughout the thingy, and I kind of have Michael, the narrator, explain what an interlude is in theater and movies, and he talks about examples of interludes like the Jedi training sequence in The Empire Strikes Back and the Rocky movies and all of these things before, and he's kind of admitting to the reader, yeah, this is an interlude because we got a few weeks and I don't want to bore you. I'm just going to give you a couple thousand words to share what happened in the last 2 weeks. And so I think that's a lot of fun for me as a writer, because I can push the boundaries. I loved a theater like Brechtian theater that did break that wall, and where you could address the audience and acknowledge, yeah, okay, I know you're watching something right now. And so Michael kind of does that, because it always bothered me. Like, if someone's narrating a book, are they aware that they're narrating a book? Like, what is this thing? Let's just be honest here. So that's, I have a lot of fun with that, and I think it's come organically out of the series. I started off thinking tension and fear, and then of course the humor just jumped right out at me, and I just rolled with it. I thought, okay, let's go with it and see where we take it. And it seems to be something that people enjoy. So I enjoy writing it. They enjoy reading it. I'll probably keep doing that for a bit.
I love it. Like, I love mixing tough stuff, whether it's action, horror, gore, or taboo, difficult topics that I tend to write with. But then when you interject humor underlying, and then kind of, is the narrator actually know that they're narrating book? The last time I was writing, one of the lines I wrote was like, yes, you read that, right? And then I'm like, continue on.
Exactly.
But I find it so much more engaging because for me specifically, I know not everybody is like that, but it just makes it a little bit more relatable in my opinion anyways. And I have a lot of fun writing it from a creator point of view, because it feels like you're not only in the story but also kind of directing the story and playing puppet master at the same time. So
Yeah. It's Rod Serling coming out and saying, "Imagine this," or it's reader, I married him. Right? Like, come
yeah.
on, classic literature. We like, bam, no wonder it's lasted so many years. She just turns right to you and says something.
Boom.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
You remind me, because you said I haven't heard the word Brechtian since I got my English degree, and you remind me like the world's smartest, down to earth, like classic literature, pop culture melding together.
I love medleys like that, right? Like, it's kind of like probably the reason why you like going into bookstores and hanging out in places like that, because you can have fun and be serious, and you can be scary and funny and sexy and terrified and nervous, and all these things can all intermingle, because I mean, really, as humans, we're little bits of everything, right?
Sure are.
So in this latest book, what are the readers going to find that maybe separates it from the first three? What's the new adventure?
It's a lot darker because some white supremacist neo-Nazis have invaded New York City. They've brought it back to a state of kind of like similar to the Purge. You don't want to go out at night, or at least every night is Purge night. A lot of tension, very reminiscent of I call it the Charles Bronson Death Wish movie, New York era of the late 70s and early 80s, where it actually was a terrifying city where they were recommending you don't go out after dark. And one of the things that I think my readers who love the action and adventure, there's more love and romance in it. And so even it was like one of the reviews I got was, I would have given this 5 stars, but there's just way too much lovey stuff, because there is Michael Andrews and his love life, and in this particular one, it's his ex-girlfriend who he's always had feelings for, who starts to admit she has feelings for him just when he shows up with this new woman in his life. So there's this weird triangle of the three of them, and the tension. And I just really wanted to throw that tension in and see what happened. Watch the players. Here's your ad lib thing, like for theater. Okay, here's your situation. Go on stage. I'm going to watch this, and that's kind of how I wrote it. See what they do.
See what happens.
I do that with all my characters because they don't listen to me anyway. So
Yeah,
I just write and go, well, what are you gonna do? And I'm just writing up the incident report.
that's right. You're just watching and writing it down.
Yeah, letting it happen.
So if people want to read the series or find out more about you, where can they find that information?
You can go to canadianwerewolf.ca, or you can go to markleslie.ca, my website, where it links to that series as well as my many other books.
Awesome.
Beautiful. We'll make sure to keep that link in the show comments as well, but it's right there below for everybody, just in case.
Well, thank you so much. The only sad part is that we ran out of time. That's not fair.
It tends to go that way when we have lots to talk about. So the 30 minutes flew by, but thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. We'll make sure to keep all your links available for all of our viewers and listeners so they can come follow you. Follow for dad jokes. It'll make your life, I promise. We had a blast today. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Just before we head off, a big thank you to our show sponsors, Creative Edge Publicity and the Authors Library Network, and of course, all our viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Bye, everybody. Till next time.